What's good, my dear language learning masters, and welcome to Natural Languages, and welcome to the Language Input podcast. And yeah, welcome to a new interview. And today I'm gonna have Anne from Australia, and she's actually both a Spanish and Indonesian teacher. So this is gonna be a fun episode again. And well, she's gonna tell us about her experience living in Spain and in different parts around the planet. Okay, and yeah, she's also gonna answer the question about whether grammar study is actually necessary or not. I mean, we already know that's not what you need in order to learn a language, but still a lot of people think it's necessary to some extent. So I'm gonna ask her that question to see what her opinion is on the topic. And yeah, so hope you enjoy it, and let's get right into it. Let's go. Hi, Anne,
Hi,
and
nice to meet you.
yeah, welcome to the podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you on.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and yeah, it's exciting.
Cool. So yeah, yes, to get things started, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and especially when it comes to your experience with languages, as a language teacher yourself or as a language learner. Yeah.
Okay, so I live in Melbourne, Australia,
Mhm.
and I guess my first experience as a language learner was when I was in year 8. That's the first year of high school here,
Mm.
and I did French, and I did very well in it, and I probably should have continued, but my mother talked me into doing, the secretarial subject. So I sort of took typing for the rest of high school and didn't do any more language. And then my next taste of language was when I was much older, and I'd been a classroom teacher for a while, and it was Australia's bicentennial. So I think it was 1988. And we had all these tall ships from around the world come to Australia.
Okay.
And most of them went to Sydney, but I lived in a small port city at that stage, and one of the tall ships came to Gladstone, my hometown, and it was the Guayas, and it was from Ecuador. So I think it stayed in our city, our small city, for a couple of weeks, and it was over Christmas time, and the ship had its own band, and they were playing Feliz Navidad, and having like a big town party. So my friends and I made friends with some of the guys, and they showed us over the boat, and we asked them back to have a swim in a neighbour's pool, and we got chatting. I got chatting with one guy, can't remember his name now, but he was teaching me little bits of Spanish. So I guess that was what sparked my interest. And I actually wrote to him for a while, and was learning little bits of Spanish. And then I decided to do what was called a mini exchange, and it was organised through the Department of Education. So I went to Oregon for 2 weeks, and the lady I stayed with was learning Spanish at a community college. So she took me along to the classes with her, and we played bingo. So I got to know the numbers, and it was really good. I got sort of more interested in Spanish, and then after that, I went over to England, because I'm actually born in England but lived in Australia since I was 3.
Yeah.
So I can't even remember how I think I decided to go to Spanish classes in England, and the guy who was teaching me said, "Oh, I've got a friend in Spain. If you want to go to Spain, you could probably stay with her." So that's what I ended up doing. I went to Spain. I stayed with this lady, Marisa. She lived in Catalonia.
Okay.
And I stayed with her for a couple of months. And I just fell in love with Spain. I think I fell in love with the music and the dancing, and because I love dancing, I love music. And it just seemed like every weekend, in the plaza, there's dancers, and it was just, it was so cool. And so I ended up staying for nearly 2 years in Spain.
Nice.
I was teaching English just to, make ends meet, and learning Spanish at the same time. And then when I left Spain, I came back to Australia. I just had a certificate of teaching at that stage. So I did a Bachelor of Arts and I did Spanish and journalism. And then I was teaching a bit of Spanish, and I went, I did an international university exchange. I went to Chile for 6 months and studied a couple of subjects in Spanish.
Nice.
Which was awesome. And then I came back, and I think I was still just a regular classroom teacher at that stage, but I used to teach my own class Spanish. Yes, I kind of got interested in teaching the language, and yeah, and then I went back to uni and I did applied linguistics. That's right, and I majored in teaching and learning a second language. So I had to teach my own class Spanish as part of that. And anyway, down the track, then I got married, had my kids. So I was out of the teaching game for a while. Then when I wanted to go back to teaching, I went to a new school in my area, and I said, look, I'm a language teacher. I can teach Spanish. And they said, great, we need a language teacher, but our language is Indonesian. And I said, well, I've never been to Indonesia and I don't speak a word of Indonesian. And they said, oh, that's okay. If you've got the methodology, and we'll train you, we'll pay for you to be trained in Indonesian. And when I actually started at the school, I was only there for 1 day a week. And they said, oh, no, we're not going to pay for you to get trained if you're only teaching 1 day a week. So I was kind of stuck then. And I was teaching Indonesian to year 7s. I'd never had above year 5 in my life, never taught above year 5. And it was an absolute nightmare. Like, they were shooting pens into the ceiling, and I had to learn everything before I could teach it to them. It was just an absolute nightmare. Wow. But the Department of Education paid for me to have some training. So then I did an online course, and I taught Indonesian for about maybe 6 or 7 years. And then I was at a different school, and by this time I was full-time, and there were 3, I think, Indonesian teachers at my school. So we were noticing that kids weren't retaining anything. They were just, going through our whole program, but couldn't speak to us, couldn't write. All their little conversations that they had for assessment, it was all scripted, it was all practice, and it just wasn't natural. So I started hunting around on the internet, and I tried a few different things, because the schools then, they were really, really, like, back when I first started teaching languages, there were so many PDs that you could go to, professional development days, and so I was trying different things all the time. But I started looking at the internet, and I eventually came across this thing, TPRs, and I started reading about it, and I thought, oh my God, this sounds like it would really work. It just, it clicked with me. It just connected. And so I spoke to my team leader about it. She said, yeah, just trial it with 1 year level and see how you go. So I trialed it with year 2s. I mean, down the track, I sort of found out maybe year 2 wasn't the best year level to start with, but they were awesome, absolutely awesome. I had them, some of them were able to write little stories and everything after a few months. It was absolutely amazing. And then I just jumped in and started doing it with all my classes then.
And that, sorry to interrupt, that was Spanish, right?
No, that was Indonesian.
Oh, but you spoke the language at the time.
Well, the funny thing was, I didn't really speak it that well, but I'd done a couple of years online learning and assessments over the phone.
Wow.
And then the department actually paid for me kind of like a scholarship to go to Indonesia. So I'd been there twice, but only for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And then I did like a 3-week course. I ended up doing that twice because the first time we did it in Darwin, teachers weren't allowed to go to Indonesia because it was just after the Bali bombings. So I did it 1 year in Darwin, 3 weeks of intensive language instruction, and then I ended up doing it in Indonesia the following year. So I had 6 weeks basically in-country language learning. Yeah, and then I must have been doing CI Indonesian for maybe about 6 years. I had always wanted to do Spanish because obviously my Spanish was a lot more fluent than my Indonesian was. My Indonesian was terrible. My Spanish was at the level where I was qualified to translate at a professional level, just from Spanish to English.
Yep.
So I finally got the chance to teach Spanish, and that was 2 years ago now. So 2020. So I was at one, that was my first year of teaching Spanish. So now I'm in my 3rd year of teaching Spanish, and my 2nd school of teaching Spanish.
Okay.
Yeah, but I work 3 days a week teaching Spanish, and then so I work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Fridays I actually got this fantastic little gig that just landed in my lap, teaching Indonesian remotely to an outback school because they've been told by the Department of Education you have to teach a language, but they can't get language teachers because it's remote.
Right.
So I sit on my screen like I am right now. The kids go into their library at school. The principal supervises them, and they watch me on the big screen, and I teach them Indonesian.
Okay. Yeah, I guess those are Australian problems, right? That a school in the middle, quote unquote, in the middle of nowhere, that I guess not a lot of people want to go there to physically teach the language, right?
Yeah. But it's also COVID as well, because they can't even get classroom teachers at the moment. So it's sort of a mixture of the two things.
Okay. Yeah.
So I hope I haven't left anything out. It's been a bit of a long journey.
Oh, good. It's really good. Yeah, I have a couple of questions in mind, but I want to go back to, I mean, the reason why I asked you about Indonesian is because when you taught Indonesian for the first time, you didn't speak the language, right? That's what you said.
No.
So that just sounded crazy to me.
Yes, it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and
it was a nightmare. It was terrible.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was before TPRs, you said. So, yeah, I mean, the thing is, because quote unquote, anyone can just take a textbook and teach the grammar structures and so on. We feel like you don't even need to speak the language in order to teach it, which is crazy.
Yeah. But funnily enough, it was teaching TPRs that helped me learn. And in one small way, even though I didn't have great language skills, there was one little thing that made me a better TPRS practitioner, and that was I had to go slow because I was not able to go fast. I wasn't fluent in the language myself, so I actually had to be slow.
Right.
Yeah, and then when I found TPRS, I sort of discovered Blue Kathy, and started reading her blog. And then I made contact with her, and she said, "Oh, come and visit me, observe me in the classroom and stay with me." So I went down because I'm in Victoria. So I flew to South Australia and I stayed with her, and I went to her classroom, and I just learned so much from her. And then she was like my mentor. She supervised my planning. She shared her planning with me. We were constantly on the phone to each other, sharing ideas and bouncing ideas off each other. And that, has been going on since then for years. We just sort of click in the way we teach and the ideas that we have. So yeah, that was really awesome.
Yeah, that's nice. Cool. Yeah, and I was also thinking, like, you talked about your first experience with languages being French, right? But I guess that was you were taught the traditional way, right? When it comes to
when I was at high school, when I was learning French.
When you took French for the first time, yeah.
Yeah, it was traditional. We had a native speaker, but it was learning the traditional way, I guess, like from a textbook.
Mm-hmm.
But funnily enough, when she taught us songs, like I can still remember little bits of the songs that we did. And I guess because that's a bit, it's more natural, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about, because you talked about French and Spanish, and all of the experiences that you talked about when it comes to Spanish sounded natural to me, as opposed to learning French in a traditional grammar environment in class. So I was going to ask you about that. Like, what was the difference? I mean, I was going to say, what was the difference? But I guess you're perfectly fluent in Spanish. And how are your French?
Well, I would never say perfectly fluent.
But you're fluent.
Yeah. But it was interesting because I came back from Spain and then I went to uni and studied Spanish. And so that was still fairly much grammatically based. But I found it easier because I had that little thing in my head that said, this sounds right or this doesn't sound right. And if you didn't have that, I reckon you'd struggle a lot more.
Okay. Feeling of correctness, right?
Yeah. And then obviously being in country in Chile as well, I had 6 months there as well. Yeah. It's funny because when I went to Chile, I thought, my Spanish is great. I'm going to have no problems. But some of the words for things were so different. Yeah.
Different accent as well, right?
Different accent, yeah. It was great though. I loved it. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, because actually a lot of my Spanish students tell me that Chilean or Argentinian accent is the hardest of all.
The Argentinian one, I find that really hard to understand. Yeah. Chilean, no, because I guess I kind of know that one now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even some of the students there used to call me La Españolita. So I must have been speaking Spanish with a, Spanish accent.
Yeah, because that was after your 2 years in, was it Barcelona or a smaller town?
Yeah, it was just south of Barcelona. Yeah. Villanova y la Geltrú.
Oh, nice. Like on the coast. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so and how about your French? Did you manage to acquire French?
Look, I can remember little bits, un petit peu. I mean, yeah, tiny bit. But maybe I could understand a little bit. I can actually read a little bit too. Like if I see a paragraph, I can sometimes make out the meaning, but there's no way I'd be able to produce.
Right. Yeah, because I was just thinking that your the two first languages that you had experience with were French and Spanish, right? And one you ended up acquiring Spanish, and the other you didn't, which is French. And I wonder how much of it is because you loved Spanish right away, or actually because French you just try to learn it the traditional way. I would say try because it's not going to work, as opposed to naturally acquiring Spanish.
Yeah. I mean, I had to acquire it too. There wasn't a choice because I was there on my own, and I'm a chatterbox. I love to talk. So I sometimes think that it helps if you're a bit of a chatterbox. You really have great motivation then to want to learn and speak.
You want to be able to communicate.
Yeah. But I remember my Spanish friend saying to me, "Hablas como una india," because I would say I didn't know how to use tense at first, So I'd say like ayer voy a la plaza or whatever. I would just use those time and then just speak in the present tense, but just use a word at the front to help me out.
Yeah, like meaning based, but you didn't know the specific verb tenses or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess the question is, so when it comes to French, did you sort of give up because you weren't interested in it, because you weren't forced to learn the language like you were with Spanish, or was it also that because of the traditional grammar approach, you just didn't enjoy it?
No, I actually did enjoy it, and I did really well in French. I think I was probably one of those 4%ers though. You know, I think the only reason I stopped doing it was because my mum advised me, oh, you know, typing would be better for your skill set, you know, for when you, so I took typing over French. I mean, I do regret that I didn't keep going with it, but typing did come in handy, to be honest, you know. Especially with, you know, everybody, you know, working on computers and stuff. But I would have liked to keep going with French.
Okay, and when you're saying you did well, that means like in class, like tests and so on, or you were
on tests?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean on tests. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we went to my family, like my husband and my 2 boys, when they were younger, because my brother lives in France. So we took the boys to Europe, and we had a little bit of time in Spain, a bit of time in France, a bit of time in Germany.
Nice.
And so a little bit of French I could understand. You know, sometimes I'd see a notice up somewhere and I could understand what it said. But I would not be able to get into a conversation with someone.
Right.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, because when the reason I asked you about what it meant to do well is because I always remember, like, you know, in Spain, I think we started learning English at age 5, if I'm not mistaken. So the point is, from age 5 to 18, had 13 years of English.
Wow.
And when I was 18, I could pass a grammar exam.
Yes.
Not great, but I would do okay. But I just couldn't speak the language.
Yeah.
Like, not at all, right? So that.
Well, that was my experience with Indonesian. Like when I did Indonesian, it was funny because the Australian teachers that we had in Indonesia, I mean, in Darwin, when we did the course, they were brilliant teachers, and it was a much more comprehensible input way of learning. When we went to Indonesia the second year, it was very, very traditional and dead boring, to be honest. Yeah. And yeah, I scored really well on the grammatical tests, like you say, but yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, and even now, I just look at a piece of text in Indonesian, and I can't even try. I can't even attempt to read it. It just turns me off.
Right.
It's just, yeah, I give up because I know I'm not going to be able to understand it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also talked about that many times, like the difference comprehensible input makes in your language journey. It is, I mean, I've seen so many people give up on languages, and people that are actually super interested in languages just because of the traditional grammar approach. Because, you know, you can be the most motivated person on earth, but sooner or later you're going to end up giving up because the process is hard. It's boring. You're not getting any results, you know, and every time you attempt to communicate, you have to think about everything you want to say. It's just a nightmare. Yeah.
So when did you feel like you learned English? Did you go and live somewhere for a while?
Oh, I've talked about that as well. Is when I started watching the NBA, like basketball.
Really? Yeah.
Because again, I was actually interested in the game, right? So I started watching it in English, and you know, after those 13 years studying the language, at least I could understand a couple of things here and there, so I could follow along. But you know, I'd say for a 13-year period, that's really poor, but it was still good enough for me to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is, I was so interested in the game that I kept watching games and more games. And of course, I sort of had the hope that was going to help me out, but I was watching it because I loved it. I still do. I was interested in the game, not in the language itself. So, I've watched hundreds of thousands of hours of comprehensible input, right? Because that's also the good thing about sports, that you've got commentators describing what's going on, and at the same time, you actually get to see what the player is doing. So it's easier to connect the words with the action itself. That's really helpful. But yeah, that was it. Like, I can't even say the amount of time I spend watching games, because I like it. Like I said, that to me, that's the key to language learning. Like, whether that's sports or storytelling, or the story listening from the perspective of the student, or reading, whatever it is, the ideal scenario is in which you're interested in the topic itself, in the story, in the game, and that game, story, book happens to be in the language that you want to learn, as opposed to focusing on grammar, on form, on the specific structures, right? And don't tell me how, but the brain sort of knows, and it ends up acquiring the language. It's just how it works. It's how it's always worked. That's how we all acquire a native language. And again, with that, I'm not saying we should talk to adults the way we talk to kids, but the principles have to be the same, because it's a process that works 100% of the time. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember when I was teaching English to Spanish young adults in Villanova, they sometimes they would say to me, "Oh, but why? Why is it like this?" And at that stage, I hadn't learned a language using, having lots of grammar like I did when I went back to uni for Spanish. I said to them, I can't tell you why. That's just the way it is, But often students, will ask, why?
Yeah, it happens all the time. And native speakers don't know why, and even teachers like yourself, like you said, I was going to say I get asked all the time, but the good thing is my students, they already know what they're going to get from me. So they're not that interested in the language, in form itself. So I don't get that many questions, but, like YouTube comments or somewhere else. Like, why are you using the subjunctive? It's everyone's favorite, subjunctive. And I'm like, because it sounds right. I don't know. And then they start talking about crazy vertenses that I don't even know which one is which one, like pretérito, whatever. And I'm like, which one is that? I don't even know, and it happens all the time with every single language. Like, I live in Poland, like I said, so not anymore. But at the beginning, I remember asking my friends, why do you say that? Why do you change the ending? Things like that. And they were like, I don't know. It's just the way it is. And through comprehensible input and through naturally acquiring the language, back to your point that you talked about before, you develop a sort of feeling of correctness, right? So it just, certainly with your native language, but with other languages eventually as well, like, you don't even know when someone makes a mistake, you don't even know what the mistake is, or you're not sure. You just know it doesn't sound right in your mind, right? That's totally independent from conscious grammar study, right? Anyways.
And gosh, I can remember when I was first teaching Indonesian, I would have to assess the kids on pronunciation, word order, grammatical, like all this kind of thing. And I don't even need to teach that anymore. They just get it. Their pronunciation is beautiful. They mostly get the word order correct. It's amazing. I could not go back to teaching traditionally now. No way in the world.
Yeah, it's just a subconscious process. Like, we don't control it, fortunately, to be honest. It just happens, And do you have any, because I've been getting crazy stories from other teachers recently, like, do you have any story of a language student that you started out with them the traditional way, and either they hated it or they just weren't interested. And when you switch to comprehensible input and TPRS, it looked like a totally different person, like so engaged, and things like that. Like the different switching to TPRS or comprehensible input made in your language career.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what? I honestly can't remember, because I've been doing it for like about 9 years now, and the first class I did it with, they were little. They were only like 6 or 7, and they were year 2s, and I can't even remember what they were like. Like, they're usually pretty engaged at primary school, but I honestly can't remember. But I know what did really stick out to me was that they used to use it, just without thinking. They would use it in the playground. So they like, I remember one little girl, when she was prep, she wouldn't even come into the classroom, and then her teacher would bring her in, and then she was very, very, very shy. And then the next year, a year later, she'd see me out on yard duty, and she'd come up and she'd say, the crocodile's eating Ibu Ann, or she'd just make some little joke, and then her and a friend would go off into peals of laughter. So they'd just, and then, but the best story was that I used to get confused about which classes I was picking up when, right? And I remember I went out of the Indonesian room once, and there was a class outside, and I went up to them and I said, have I got this class now? And I must have already asked them like a couple of times previously the same day. And one of the kids just said, oh, Ibu Ann gila, or something like that, like Ibu Ann's crazy, because, it was just without thinking. It was awesome. I just loved it. I just love when that happens. It's perfectly in the right context. It's perfectly said. It's just magic. And that never would have happened before.
Right. Yeah, it's just, I don't even have the words to describe the difference between one or the other. Because I keep talking about it as well. Like, now I realize that languages are my passion, and I love learning them. I love teaching them. I'm never going to stop learning languages. And I keep reminding people it wasn't like that before, like I struggle with languages myself, like just as everyone else, because that's just not the way the language mechanism works. So, we're all going to struggle that way. And it's such a different experience. Anyway.
I can remember someone saying, and I don't know who it was, but I can remember someone saying, if you can learn your first language, then, you can learn any language. Exactly. I really love that, because it's so true. You just got to learn it the right way.
Yeah. We all have the ability, like, except for a few, like, unfortunately, like some brain damage or things like that. It worked for every one of us when we were kids. So we all have that ability. What I like to say is, when we're adults, it's not that we lose the ability to learn languages. It's just we learn to learn them the wrong way, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
We start paying attention to grammar as opposed to communication, which is the most important thing. And other things.
And it's just so sad that there's so many adults in the world who feel that way, who feel, oh, I'm no good at languages. It's just not true.
Exactly. Yeah. That's when I tell people that I speak 7 languages, the first
Wow.
the first place they go into is you must be talented, or your natural ability for it. And I wish people could be in my head 10 years ago. Like, I just wish, like, it's not about talent. Like, and I won't get tired of repeating that, because there's so many adults giving up because of the traditional grammar approach, like I said, or because they think they're not talented enough. It's not that you're not talented, it's that that specific process that you're trying to learn the language with has never worked for anybody ever, right? So, I mean, I actually understand why they think that way. I used to feel that way myself, because it's just so dominant all over the world that that's the only thing you know. That's the only way you know in order to learn a language as an adult. And because the process is not working, and again, it's not your fault, it's just not how it works. But because it's not working and you think it should, what's left? Where's the problem? It must be me, right? The only variable left.
Yeah.
And I'll keep repeating this over and over again until it hits for people. Like, it's not about talent. It's about following the right principles. That's it. It's about comprehensible input, watching resources that you're interested in, listening to podcasts whose topic you're interested in, of course, adjusting to your level so it's comprehensible, because otherwise it's just noise, right? But reading books that you're interested in, your favorite, whatever it is, sports,
Yeah.
And it's just so enjoyable that, I mean, like I said, I'm going to keep learning languages forever because I love it. I love every single minute of it, as opposed to 10, 15 years ago when I just didn't like it. I mean, it's not, I was going to say I hated it. Not really. It was just sort of indifferent, like, okay. Like one more subject in school. Nothing special. And it's actually my passion. So
yeah, do you know what I found really hard is I was teaching with comprehensible input, and my son, who was at high school, was learning his language traditionally, and I'm like, no.
Right. And
yeah,
he was learning.
we don't have a lot of people in Australia really that use comprehensible input.
Right.
And Kathy was really good because she instigated it in South Australia, and she had quite a big group of people. And we did have quite a few people who went to the conference in Brisbane. But the funny thing is there doesn't seem to be a lot of Spanish speakers who are using it, which, it's frustrating. Anyway, someone's got to start things up, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I mean, right now we have the internet and you can listen to a lot of things, but of course it's always nicer if you have someone live to talk to, right?
Yeah. Or even to go and visit classrooms, I mean, that really helped me to go and visit Kathy's classroom and just see it happening right in front of you. That was awesome.
The pieces together. Yeah, that was the conference in Ajan for me. Like I had, before I went there, I'd watched a lot of videos. I read Stephen Krashen's books and a lot of things, but it was seeing it live in action that really clicked for me. Like, okay. Yeah. I mean, really clicked. What I mean is I was already convinced, but it showed me how to do it, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so I have to do this in order to be comprehensible, which is ultimately the only thing I mean, of course, if you make it interesting, that's always going to be better, right? But in the end, if they understand what you're saying, they're learning the language. It's that simple. Yeah. So, and I want to ask you about when, back to comprehensible input and grammar and so on, because I'm putting out a lot of content because, like I said, it's my passion and I love it and I want to help as many people as possible. And I can see that a lot of people who are convinced or who believe in comprehensible input, okay, so they understand that that's the way, but they still think some sort of grammar backup, whatever you want to call it, is necessary. So, I see a lot of comments like, okay, it makes sense. What you say makes sense. Or in other people's channels or, somewhere else. Like, it makes sense what you're saying, but I still think you need to know the basics. You need to study grammar at the beginning so you have the basics. So what's your take on that? What's your opinion?
No. Look,
end of the story. Just kidding.
End of story. I had a bit of a tricky time last year. No, not last year now, the year before. I worked with a native Spanish speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started at the school, he said, okay, this is how I start. I start with the alphabet, and we learn the alphabet sounds, and we do phonics, and, you know, we learn the sounds that the vowels make and everything. And I went, yeah, okay. He justified it by saying, that's the way I learned at school. But I said to him, yeah, but when you went to school, you'd already had 5 or 6 years of input. But yeah, it was difficult because he, you know, didn't want to hear it. It's very hard when you've got, you know, colleagues. I know a lot of people are in that boat. It's yeah, you can't convince them. You just got to do your own thing, you know. You've got, I think sometimes you've got to say yes, 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 great idea, yes, we'll do that, yes, 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 and then just go into your classroom and do your own thing. Right.
Yeah, you can start mentioning things, and if you see they're just not open, that's okay. You know, we're all close to some subject or some topic. You know, like, so yeah, it's impossible to convince people that don't want to be convinced, right? Just like you said, you just do your thing, whatever it is, and hopefully more and more people will jump on board, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, sorry, I interrupted. Like, back to the question. Yeah, like.
Yeah, usually I'll wait till a student asks something before I, you know, give them a grammatical point. Although the other day I did say something about pollito, and I just quickly explained what the ito does to a word, and yeah, they thought that was really cute because I was going around saying their names but putting an ito on the end. And then at the end of the lesson, I've got this awesome student. He's so good. He said to me, so if there's an ito on the end to make it a small something, is there something you can put it on the end to make something bigger? And I just thought, oh my God, what an awesome question. You know, some kids just want that. They've just got that. They want to know more.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the thing about the, you know, grammar, about, like I said, these people thinking that, okay, comprehensible input is the way, but you still need to learn some grammar or study some grammar. It's like back to the feeling of correctness thing. And I'm sure everyone can relate to this when it comes to the native language. That, again, when someone makes a mistake in their own native language, they, you know, it just doesn't sound right in their mind. You just know that is, and it's like I'll use the same example I usually use with Spanish, and you probably relate to it, is that every single Spanish-speaking kid says rompido at the beginning. I mean, like the word for broken, right? For everyone listening that doesn't speak Spanish. So the word for broken is roto, okay?
Yeah.
So roto is the right word, or the correct conjugation, if you will, but it's irregular, right? As opposed to rompido, which would be the regular conjugation, but it's just incorrect, right? So the thing is, every single Spanish-speaking kid says rompido at the beginning. Why? Because, you know, through other examples, through comprehensible input, comer, comido, beber, bebido, etc., their brain sort of develops the language rule without them having to consciously study the rule, which is great news, by the way. But back to the point. So they start saying rompido all the time. And I'm sure we can find examples with every single language in the world.
Yeah.
Things like that. So the thing is, the language mechanism develops the language rule on its own without needing to study it, right? And over time, you know, when they listen to the right word enough times, they just start saying it the right way. Yeah.
Yeah. When they're developmentally ready, just like BVP used to say.
Yep.
They go through stages of development.
Exactly. It is, and rompido, and there are other examples, yeah, but I'm sure we can come up with examples with our languages, but it is, I'm not saying grammar is not important. All I'm saying is you don't need to consciously study it. Like through comprehensible input and understanding the message, your brain is gonna develop those structures, those rules. So, and that's excellent news, by the way. You know,
Yeah.
it means, you know, those days are
No studying.
yeah, those days are over, you know. It is, yeah. Anyway, and actually, yeah, I also wanted to ask you about another thing, and this is something I've been thinking about. So this is not, I haven't read any research on it. It's just a personal feeling with the languages that I already speak. I'm starting to feel that consciously studying grammar, not only is it not necessary, but it actually gets in the way.
Yeah, because it makes you overthink things. Yeah, I can see what you mean. You start to think about it before you communicate, and so you kind of held back in your communication.
Exactly, and I've seen it in myself. I'll give you an example in a moment, but I also see it in my students. Like sometimes I can see that they're going to say something in Spanish, or they actually say it like naturally, like because that's what comes out naturally. And then like a second after they've said it, they start thinking, was that right? Or is it right? And they say a different thing. And the first time around was correct. And the second, they start hesitating, right?
You know what? It's so funny you should say that, because I do that all the time. Because I've been teaching Indonesian for so long and I've lost my contact with Spanish a bit, I constantly doubt my Spanish. And I do the same. My first instinct will be correct, but I'll get, you know, my phone and I'll be Googling it, and yeah, I'm right, but I just doubt every single time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about my own journey. In my own journey, I started to feel that when I started learning Italian, and after a while, you know, after a couple of years or so, that I could start communicating in the language. And you know, before people say that Italian is closer to Spanish, so that's a different case. I'm going to compare Italian as opposed to French or Portuguese. So I'm not talking Chinese and different languages, right? So my feelings being that I'm more fluent in Italian when I'm communicating as opposed to Portuguese or French, because Portuguese or French, to some extent, I did studies in grammar, because with French, I studied it in high school as well. Yeah. And with Portuguese, when I started learning Portuguese, it was just a couple of years before I realized that, you know, comprehensible input and TPRs is the way to go. So obviously that's not what helped me acquire the language. I know that, right? But to some extent, I did studies in grammar. And I feel like my Italian is way more fluent, or it feels more fluent to me and in my head, because I don't have that conscious knowledge to sort of rely on, if that makes sense. So
that makes sense.
All I'm saying when I'm communicating in Italian is what's in my head, you know, it's naturally coming out of my mouth, right? So I don't overthink things, as opposed to the other two, that it's not that it happens all the time, but to a minimum extent, it does happen because of that. So I'm starting to think, is this the right conjugation? Is this correct? It happens all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, grammatical instruction holds you back. Yeah. That's really interesting thought. I've got a question for you now. Do you get mixed up sometimes? Because you said you speak 7 languages, and when you're flipping and do you ever get mixed up?
I do, but not as much as people think, first of all. But then it's funny, because I mean, I'll answer your question first, but I do I'll do because, how to put this into words? I do when I'm trying to say something that I haven't acquired yet, if that makes sense. Or I'm trying to communicate in Italian, for instance, right? And one specific word or sentence, I haven't, for whatever, I haven't just listened to that specific sentence enough times, or it's not there yet. So because I haven't acquired that specific word or structure yet, I lean in, I rely on Spanish or Portuguese, so I do mix them up a little bit. Or if there's a word that I can't remember in Italian, sometimes the Portuguese one comes up.
Yes.
And I'm like, is this Italian or Portuguese? Wait, but when I'm communicating naturally, like when things that I've already acquired, no. And the funny thing is, there's a funny thing that happens to me, that I'm listening to a podcast in Portuguese, for instance, and it's like Portuguese is coming in my head, right? Like it's Portuguese coming. But then I switch to Italian and I start having thoughts in Italian. Or sometimes so I've been listening to a podcast in Portuguese. So it's like I have Portuguese in my head. And then I go to a meeting, for like a language exchange meeting, to speak Italian. And for like the 5-10 seconds, I'm like, oh, like I can't remember anything. Then it's like my brain switches into Italian mode and then it starts to come out, right?
Yeah.
So like for whatever reason, don't tell me why, but the brain knows. If you're communicating with an Italian person, the brain switches to Italian, right?
I think you're right. I think you need a little transition period, because I go from teaching Spanish and then teaching Indonesian. I sometimes think, oh my God, how do I say that in Indonesian? And sort of struggle for maybe the first few seconds.
Right.
But then once I'm in there, then it's okay. It just takes a little while to get in there. And I remember when I was actually in Spain and I told my friend that I spoke some Indonesian, she said, count to 10 in Indonesian. I want to hear what it sounds like. And I was like, I can't. I'm in Spain, I'm with you.
Dos, tres.
It was so weird. It was really weird. So I think it depends a lot on the situation too that you're in, because your brain must get used to being in either places or situations, which I really find fascinating.
Yeah, and even in my own head, like I said, I'm listening to something in Portuguese, and for whatever reason, I'm imagining myself having a conversation in Italian later on that day, right? Just thoughts coming on my head, and for the first 10 seconds, only Portuguese comes up. It's like, wait. Like, it's like I'm rehearsing the conversation in Italian in my head, but for the first 10 seconds, I can, because I've been listening to Portuguese.
Yeah.
Right now, like 5 seconds ago. So it takes me like 10 seconds to wait, Italian now.
Yeah. A little recalibration in the brain, maybe.
But we don't get to control that. Fortunately, the brain knows, and it works. Yeah. So and also for the most part, when I want to say a specific word in Italian or Portuguese or French, and I can't recall it, I can't recall it because I don't have the time to think about it in real time speed, which means I haven't acquired it yet. Okay. So a Portuguese word would come up. And sometimes I just go with the Portuguese word because that's the thing that comes in my head. And especially with related languages, it's not that's going to make a difference in the communication. When it comes to understanding what I'm saying. So if I'm speaking Italian and I throw a Spanish word here and there because it just comes that way, they're going to understand for the most part. So again, back to communicating being the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
It is.
I like that. Yeah.
So, but again, we're always going to come back to the traditional grammar approach, and which leads into you paying attention to grammar and form and being worried about making mistakes and things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
as opposed to just, let it fly and focus on communicating. Yeah.
What age students do you teach?
Adults. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have
okay.
I was going to say I teach from prep to year 6, just primary school. For quite a long time, I just had preps to 2s when I was teaching Indonesian. So to be honest, I didn't need a great bank of vocab anyway, because I was trying to limit it. And that's what I really loved about when I started reading about comprehensible input. Limit the vocab. I'm thinking, yes, because I've got no choice. My vocab is limited. But yeah, now I'm teaching P to 6. I really like that age level.
Yeah. The thing is, I do it 100% online. So with kids online, it's a bit tougher. I mean, you probably know that with your Outback students, or
yes, definitely. And the younger ones, the younger they are, the harder it is remotely. Yeah.
Because we adults can sit in front of a computer for hours and not even blink, right? But kids need the movement and the interaction and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it's how to put it into words. Like, it's sort of easier to teach adults when it comes to the fact that they're actually interested in the language. They actually want to learn the language. And when it comes to kids, they might or they might not. They might be fooled by their parents. So, it depends. So that's a huge class when for teaching adults. And but then the good thing about kids, and you probably can tell me more about that, is they don't have the prejudices that we have when it comes to language learning, right? That for the most part, they're not worried about what verb tense you're using. They just want to understand what you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
And they get immersed in whatever story you're telling them, and they're not worried about was that feminine or masculine? Is it el or la?
It's funny because the really younger ones, like the preppies, when they're first year of school, they're totally open. When they come to be about maybe 10 and up, that's when they might sort of go, well, why do I have to say it like that? Or what? They're more hung up, I guess, about the form and how it actually works, whereas the little ones just go with the flow.
Right.
So they're so easy to teach.
Yeah.
Well, in that way, anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're talking about 10-year-old and up, I have my theory, but do you think that's because, I mean, there's some natural part in it, some natural curiosity in it, or is it mainly, which is my opinion, is it mainly because they've already had like 4 or 5 years of conscious study of their own native language? Like, they've had English classes in which they're trying to learn grammar and so on.
I think it's because they start to think about their own thinking and think about their learning. So whereas the little ones aren't freaked out at all, they're just ready to relax and go with it. And the older ones, like, they're the ones who will say to me, say that in English. Can we learn the song in English now? No, because there's a Spanish class, but
right.
Because they just want to know how it all works, and they just need, I just think it's because they're starting to think about how they're thinking. Yes. Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't 100% know the answer to that question.
But it's
just interesting.
That makes sense. It's awareness of their own thoughts. Yeah.
So they just want to know how things work. I guess because by that stage they've worked out how their language works.
Mm-hmm.
They can read and write, well, semi-perfectly, most of them, in English. So I guess they expect everything else to just make sense to them like that.
Right.
And they want sense made of it.
Right.
And so they you know, they can't sort of just relax and go with it. I think they get used to it too. I think they sort of, you know, get used to when you're teaching that way. Eventually they.
Yeah. I mean, of course. Yeah, way quicker than adults. Yeah.
But I'm lucky because I got to start up the program. So last year was their first year of language. So they're not at the stage where at my Indonesian learners, I'd had them for about maybe 7 years. You know, I'd had some of them since prep. So they were reading each other's stories and writing stories, and it was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, it just takes a while to build up a language program.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if you start teaching Spanish or Indonesian to a 12-year-old kid who hasn't had any grammar instruction in English, you know, would they be more like the 5-year-olds, you know, and just relax? Or, you know, in order to know what's the factor that's really, you know, having an impact on that.
Yeah.
You know, if they're 12-year-old and for whatever reason, like homeschooling or things of that nature, they haven't had any contact with conscious grammar instruction, I have a funny feeling, you know, like you said, they might start noticing their own thoughts, so they might be curious to some point, but I have a funny feeling that we're way more relaxed because they haven't learned to pay attention to grammar, if that makes sense. I suppose.
Yeah, I think it might also just be a developmental thing.
Yeah, that's the natural part that I was mentioning. That's probably...
like their need to understand things. They need to understand it, whereas the little ones, you know, just go with it.
Yeah.
What time is it there in Spain?
What? Sorry?
What time is it for you?
Now it's 10:36 here in Poland, but it's same time zone.
Yeah, in the morning.
Yep. So there's like a 10-hour difference, I believe.
Yeah, it's
all right.
8:30 at night for me.
So a couple more questions, and we can wrap things more about your future language learning activities. Like, is there any language that you like to learn or that you're looking to learn, or that you got?
I would actually love to learn Italian.
Oh.
We have quite a big Italian population in Melbourne. Yeah, a good friend of mine, her boyfriend's Italian. Yeah, I don't know. I would like to learn Italian.
That's cool. And how would you go about it? Like, what would be the first thing you'd do?
I would probably just play around on the internet and find someone who's doing story listening or something. That's the way I do it. Or just ask, you know, if there are teachers like you who are, you know, teaching with comprehensible input, I would do it that way. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I actually was, you know, I thought, oh, I need to improve my Spanish language. So there was a guy giving free lessons. It was some group. I can't remember the name of it, but so I went on, but it was really, really grammatically based. Like every week they had vocab, and it was vocab that I would never use. It wasn't high frequency vocab at all. So we'd talk about what the vocab meant, and I don't know, you know, do things like put it in a sentence, all this kind of stuff. And I thought, oh,
yeah,
I loved the tiny little snippets of the lesson where we'd actually get to really talk to each other, but the rest of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Even in an hour-long grammar class, there's going to be 5-10 minutes in which you're just communicating. So it's not going to be a completely waste of time, but still, yeah.
Yeah, and I probably don't remember any of those words that were in the lesson.
Right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And yeah, you were talking about vocabulary. And yeah, first of all, like you said, they were not high-frequency words. So those are not words that you're going to use. But even if they were, that's not the way to acquire them, right? Like, again, like to give you a little example, to give everyone a little example, if for whatever reason you want to learn the words for means of transportations in Spanish, don't take a word of, plane, bus, bicycle, like no context whatsoever. As opposed to that, if you listen to a story in which the main character travels from Melbourne to the United States by plane, then drives by car to another city because he's meeting a friend. So, you're actually using the words that you want to learn in context, and with enough repetitions, you're going to be able to acquire them and remember them, right? Because I also read about that a lot. Like, how do you learn vocabulary? Or how do you remember vocabulary? Things like that. Like, it's not that it's like a separate thing that you can study or memorize, It's just, if you want to learn about a specific topic, don't consciously and in an isolated way study vocabulary, but just listen to a podcast or whatever resource or to a story that you're interested in about the topic that you want to learn about, right? Because if you want to learn about business, just watch videos on YouTube that talk about business in the language you want to learn, and you're gonna learn the vocabulary naturally.
Yeah. I remember when we used to teach Indonesian traditionally, massive big banks of nouns. Yeah. There's no way that kids could remember all those. And why do you need them? If you go to the country, you can just point to those things.
Uh-huh.
You don't need to know the names of them, but you do need all the verbs.
Oh, yeah.
It makes sense to just make sure they've got all the verbs.
Right.
High frequency ones anyway.
Yeah, because you can use gestures for eating and drinking, but some of them are more complex.
Yeah. I use a lot of gestures with my kids. I do a lot of gestures with the words. And so sometimes to I can't think of the word, to switch their memory, I'll just do the gesture and then they can remember the word because they're so used to me doing it with them.
Right. Just whatever is necessary for them to understand what you're saying. It's that simple. Yeah. Simple. Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge. So that's the technique. How do you make yourself comprehensible, right? But we have gestures, we have pictures, we have real eye context, and so many things. Yeah. Cool. All right. So is there anything we forgot to talk about? Anything else you want to add, or? That's that was good. That was
well, there is one little thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had to sort of rethink, okay, if I wanted my kids to do homework, what kind of homework would I want them to do? Not that it's they don't have to do it, but I set up a YouTube channel, and so every story we did in class, I would make it into a little PowerPoint,
mm-hmm.
and then change the PowerPoint into a movie, and then just put them all on the YouTube channel. So then if their parents said to me, oh, so-and-so really loves Spanish or Indonesian and wants to do some more, how can I help them? I'll just watch the stories on the YouTube channel mm-hmm. and listen and stop and get them to tell you what it means. And yeah, so I think if they're doing any homework, it has to be more input.
I mean, yeah, it's all about input, or watch cartoons, or give them a list of comic books, for example, that's your job as a teacher, to find the resources that you think might be comprehensible for them, right? Because that's key again, but also that they're going to enjoy. But as opposed to just giving them a book and just read this, just give them a list of comic books and that they're going to be interested in.
Yeah.
And if they read them, awesome. If they don't, what
do you remember when I was in Spain as an adult, two things taught me so much.
Okay.
I had a cassette of Julio Iglesias called Raíces, and it had the lyrics in it. Well, there were Italian songs too, but so I used to listen to the songs and read all the lyrics in the train. I learned so much Spanish that way, and that was the best way to learn the or whatever verb it is that goes quería and prefería. I can't even remember now. And then the other thing was Thipi-Thapi. You remember Thipi-Thapi?
Thipi-Thapi, yeah, of course.
I used to buy those comics. I loved them. That was the only thing I could read. I couldn't read novels. They were way too hard for me. So I learned Spanish with Thipi-Thapi.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved comics as a kid. So, yeah, I read them all, like Thipi-Thapi, Mortadelo y Filemon, you know, or...
No, I think that's the only one I know.
Okay. Yeah, but just like you said, like a list of comics that find me interested. I do that with my adult students as well. Like, I don't believe in forcing people to do homework, because that's not going to work. Because
no.
I don't know about you, but when someone tells me what to do, even if I actually want to do it, I feel like I don't want to do it. If that makes sense, right? As opposed to me being the person who decides to do it. Yeah. So, and it works for kids, adults, and everyone. So what I tell them is, I mean, obviously, if all the Spanish you listen to is the one, I mean, what we're using in the classes, it's good enough, but obviously you're getting 1, 2, 3 hours of comprehensible input a week. But if you start watching cartoons, reading comic books for half an hour a day, you know, you're just going to speed up the process if it's comprehensible again, right? So it's for their own good. So, but I don't force them to do it. I just give them a list of, or I ask them, what topics are you interested in? So I look for resources that, of course, once again, on a level that I think they can understand. And just give them ideas of comic books or young adult books if they're a little bit higher. Yeah, just different idea, podcasts or whatever it is, but according to the level. So
yeah, keep plugging away at that input. Yeah,
because at the end of the day, it's about how much input you're getting, right? If you're listening to your target language, and we're assuming comprehensible all the time. If you're listening to your target language for 2 hours a week, the process is going to be slower than if you're listening to your target language for 10 hours a week. Right? Again, assuming it's comprehensible. It's a matter of getting exposed to the language. That's all you need. Like, after this entire talk that we've been having, and after all the episodes, I keep saying it. If you understand what you're listening to or reading, you're learning the language. That's it. That's it. Then we can get into specifics, but that's all you need. All right. So yeah, that's it. So thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you. It was lovely to meet you. I'm sorry, I'm sitting in the dark now. I should have put the light on ages ago.
It's getting dark in Australia. Yeah. So,
thank you. It was really good to chat with you. So, I hope to maybe meet you at Argent or somewhere one day.
Absolutely. Yeah, same here. It was a pleasure. And yeah, you were talking about Kathy, so I'm gonna reach out to her again, because I'm not gonna bail her out.
Yeah, she's so awesome. I learned so much from her. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, I'll have her on.
Yeah, so everyone should follow her podcast, and not her podcast, her blog. She does a really good blog. Yeah, and
when
she's got a YouTube channel as well.
When I have her on, I'll list all the links to to her blog or channel that she's got.
Yeah, I've got a blog too, but I haven't blogged for a while. I've been a bit naughty.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You mentioned your stories.
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is called Spanish Fun for Juniors.
Okay.
And I can send you the link.
Yeah, I'll leave it down below. Yeah. And
it might be useful for, especially if people are teaching really young kids.
Okay. But do you have one for Indonesian as well, or only Spanish?
I have one. Actually, I have Indonesian Fun for Juniors. It's got so many videos on it. It's got tons. My Spanish one is called Spanish Fun for Juniors. Okay. So it hasn't got as many. and my blog was mostly Indonesian, but now I have to start. I'm just going to change over and start doing stuff in Spanish.
I'll list all the links below because that'll be interesting.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
All right, so yeah, enjoy your evening.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful day.
And thanks so much. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye.